Good morning. My name is Lisa Weaver, and I serve as a member of the Executive Committee of the Hymn Society. Greeting to all of those. Oh, louder. Okay. Start that again. Good morning. And y'all were louder too. That was okay. This is how this works. My name is Lisa Weaver, and I serve as a member of the Executive Committee of the Hymn Society. And greeting to all of you who are participating online as well. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce our plenary speaker, the Reverend Dr. Khalia Williams. Here at Candler School of Theology, she serves as the Associate Dean of Worship and Spiritual Formation, Associate Professor in the Practice of Worship, as well as Co-Director of Candler's Baptist Studies Program. An ordained minister in both Christian Church Disciples of Christ and the American Baptist USA. She's an author and a lecturer, and she serves on several boards. Currently, she serves also as an associate minister of Providence Missionary Baptist Church. Her full biography can be found online or in your program bulletin. Here today, her address is entitled Resonant Voices, Shared Breath, Cultivating Spiritual Community Through Song. Please join me in welcoming the Reverend Dr. Khalia Williams.
So it's always good to have a speaking engagement where all you have to do is just walk up the stairs and be able to deliver your address. So please allow me to formally welcome you all here to Khalia School of Theology. We are grateful for the energy that you have brought to our campus on this summer and all the great things that have taken place over the last couple of days. I do want to take a moment to just thank everyone who's been a part of bringing this together and bringing you here. Thank you to the Hymn Society, of course, for the invitation, and to Ryan, who has been a big part of coordinating and extending my prayers to him and to his family in this time. I want to thank Felicia Patton and her brilliance of curating this week's events and being the one who brought my name forward, and to all who've been involved with the behind the scenes and the logistics and all the work that I know goes into bringing together a group such as this. It is also great to see some familiar faces in the place. To my sister, Reverend Dr. Lisa Weaver, thank you for the introduction and always just your presence. Lisa is a phenomenal friend and sister of mine. And I want to acknowledge one of my former students who's in the place, Jacob Cogman, who sang with us on Sunday night, who's here. I'd like to just welcome him and say thank you for being here and a support. He's a conversation partner. When students cross over and become friends and become colleagues, it's always a wonderful thing, and Jacob has definitely been that. And there are so many others that are in the space to bring a bit of warmth and comfort. And the comfort is needed because I will confess, because we're going to be friends real soon. So I will confess that I was surprised to receive the invitation to offer the plenary address here before this body, and I was a bit reticent to accept, primarily because when I think about the Hymn Society, I think of all of you esteemed musicians and composers and music leaders, all of you well-trained singers, and those who have this deep love for and knowledge in and experience with music, particularly hymnody. And I am neither a musician, a composer, or a well-trained singer, unless you count singing in the children's choir at my little church in Los Angeles, where they used to tuck me away in the soprano section behind the ones who had the strong verse. If you count that as training, then I'm your girl. Then I'm at home, right? No, I am kidding. I do actually have a little bit more training and experience than that. But it's not where I would name as my particular area of expertise, right? It is not necessarily where I would say I have deep understanding. I would actually place that label for myself in the area of embodiment and worship, as I am a classically trained dancer who began asking questions of performance and the performativity of bodies in sacred spaces at a very early age. And that curiosity over the years led me to inquiries of the role of the arts in worship as kind of this integral thread in this tapestry of our ritual practice and the way that we are doing the thing of theological meaning making. And so essentially, over the years, the questions that I really have been asking is, how does the creativity manifested through our bodies in sacred space shape our images of and our experiences with God? Well, at the same time that this development was happening, this little girl who used to get tucked away in the back of the soprano section was also asking questions of dance in worship. And now I've become this woman who lives and breathes worship, both in theory and in practice. And I must state that I am one who has been reared in, formed by, and remains deeply immersed in the Black church and the Black religious experience of the United States. And this multivalent particularity in which I have been formed really has given me this unique lens, I believe, through which I view and understand profound connections between sacred meaning making, spirituality, and community. Now, I offer to you this autobiographical introduction for a few reasons. First, this is my first time with you. And so I desire to establish a level of rapport among us. Second, anyone who is familiar with Black preaching knows that when you're addressing a room for the first time, you ramble a little bit at the beginning just to get a feel for who's in the room, right? I need to know who are my folks in the room and who are the ones I need to watch out for. And then finally, I offer this to you because I want to invite you all to peek into my own spiritual and personal landscape, because this lived experience has not only informed my theoretical perspectives, but it has also deepened my practical engagement with congregations. And it informs how I understand the role of particular components of worship in cultivating community among those who are gathered. And this brings me then, the untrained choir member of the group, to our conversation this morning, with this deep engagement and assessment on congregational life as we explore what I have titled Resonant Voices, Shared Breath, Cultivating Community Through Song. How many of us in the room would say that there is power in singing in community? I would hope it would be all of you. How many of us have actually experienced the power in singing in community? What was the impact for you? You cried. I saw some hands. It was emotional. You cried. Anyone else? What was the impact for you? You felt empowered, joy, energized, release, connected, transformed. Come on now, embodied. The whole premise to this entire address that I'll give in the next few minutes is really that I believe that singing together, music making together, worshiping through the creativity of our song can lead to wholeness and connection, uniting our voices and our spirits with one another and ultimately with God. Music itself has always been this integral part of the human experience. We all know this, right? Taking it back from early tribal chants to grand symphonies in the classical era, from generational folk songs to spirituals, from freedom songs to contemporary hits that top the charts. Music speaks to us in a language that spoken words alone often can't capture. It is indeed a form of expression, a medium through which we then can convey joy, sorrow, love, and even longing. This is not a new discovery for anyone in the room, and we can all attest, as we raised our hands, to the power of music. And so when we turn to this idea of congregational singing, singing in community, in the space where we are all called together to worship God, the act of singing together impacts our individual and our communal spirituality. Now, in the title of this address, I've intentionally referenced resonant voices and shared breath. So let's talk a minute about the breath. Everyone do me a favor. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Now we're going to do that again, but this time I invite you to pay attention to your body as you take the breath. Take a deep breath in and exhale. What happened while you took in that breath? You relaxed. You had to create intention before the relaxation, right? So what scientifically happens, right? This detailed explanation in the process of us taking a breath. What are we doing? Removing air into and from the lungs to facilitate what? This gas exchange within the internal environment, mostly for us to flush out carbon dioxide and bring in oxygen. That's the very practical process of breathing. This is a very natural act and something that we do several times a day, all the time, regularly. We hope. We hope. But also in that moment, particularly in the second breath, we paid attention to our breath in the process. We focused on the movement of the breath through our bodies. So this idea of paying attention to our breath has actually become a very important focus for me in congregational engagement. Now, in 2019, I started a journey researching breath as pedagogy. It's really kind of thinking about breath as a way of teaching worship in theological education. During the research process, I had the gift of working with a breath coach for over a year and practicing breath work, that is a thing, and studying the theory behind it. And from that work, I was able to then develop courses in what I call a rhythm of breath. Now, this research of breath work that I had done gave me a few lessons that I was able to employ in my teaching. You actually might even witness a few of those lessons here today. So one of the lessons, intentionality in preparation and practice. I was very intentional today of not adding tech to the presentation so that we can engage in a different way. It also taught me lessons of cyclical rhythms, how you then teach in a cyclical rhythm, not linear, but in a cyclical rhythm, which actually mirrors the way that our own spirituality works. Then it taught me that when you really begin to move in this rhythm of breath, it makes room for creativity. That's probably one of the most amazing parts that I learned, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone about it afterwards because it really is some great scientific information behind the influx of oxygen and how it impacts one's creativity. Also in this research, I learned that in teaching in this rhythm of breath, there was this necessity for creating space for flexibility and then witnessing communal transformation. So after I explored this rhythm of breath as a pedagogical tool in a few of my classes, I saw a pattern happening in the community with the students. The rhythm of breath led to laughter. Laughter led to joy in the learning process. Joy led to transformation even in the smallest ways. And transformation led to deep community. Groups of students who would have never engaged one another at all are still in community today. In fact, a group of them just sent me a picture on Friday. They were at one of the students' wedding. A group she would have never even thought to invite to her wedding. So something happened in this rhythm of breath and in this environment that was cultivated that ultimately led to this deep community. So I started thinking, well, if this is what I'm seeing in the classroom, what could happen if similar ideas were brought into the very practice of worship? What happens in worship when we slow down and pay attention to our breath, to our bodies, to the divine breath and presence of God among us, and to others who are with us in sacred space? How does our practice fundamentally change when we are more aware of our breath and our spirit, God's breath and God's spirit, and the spirit of others who are in worship with us? Well, then I did what any good researcher would do. I secretly experimented on the people at Candler in our worship practices. I'm just kidding. It wasn't so much of a secret, but it was an experiment. And so what ended up happening was I kind of dove into this commitment to center breath at the beginning of our worship services. I offered a moment, if you will, for the gathered community to share in the act of breathing. And so the exercise I just did, having you all take a deep breath and exhaling, that is what started our services. And over time, I still actually do it, even a year or two later, I received feedback, unsolicited, but I received feedback from worship participants. Now, those of you who are church leaders know you always are hesitant when people want to give you feedback. What are you really coming to tell me? But here's some of the feedback that I received. Breathing at the start of worship allowed me to actually start the service focused in the moment. I realized it was the first time I stopped to pay attention to my breath in days. It's grounding. Another said, I feel connected to God and to the people who are in worship with me. And the one that was very interesting to me that I want to highlight was one faculty member said, I notice when we don't breathe. I notice when we don't breathe. And so what I'm discovering in this idea and then through this experimentation of shared breath in worship is that it's actually not just about the breathing, because we do this all the time. It's about slowing down and paying attention to our breath, our collective breath, our communal breath, and the breath of God, the Spirit of God in our midst. This is the shared breath, the intention and the awareness of presence. And so it is with that shared breath, that intention, that we then worship, we pray, we preach, and we sing. And the resonant voices that are born from the intentionality are the fruit from which we can experience community. But how do we get there? Well, I would say that we get there first by slowing down and remembering that we sing from the canon of our own experience. Now, I told you all earlier that I am a daughter of the Black church. I'm explicitly formed by African American worship. So singing in community is actually central to my spirituality. It is actually key to the formative practices of worship with which I grew up. So, when I think about singing in community, it doesn't stop or even start in the gathered assembly of the sanctuary in the moment that we call worship. As I was preparing this, remembered moments of being a 19-year-old undergrad student in Miami, Florida, and being in the middle of Walmart with some other friends of mine who were students. And one of those friends just started singing, "He's an on-time God." And others picked up, "Oh yes, he is." And there were some people we didn't even know walking down the aisle that joined in. And it meant something for us struggling college students who were just happy to be able to have a few dollars to go to Walmart. And it also meant something for the folks who were walking by. And we were all able to connect and join in together because there was something in our own experiences that called us into the song in that moment. In worship, the shared breath of singing becomes this profound expression of our personal and our collective experiences, drawing from the unique tapestry of our individual lives. And what we find is that each note and lyric resonates with memories, emotions, and spiritual journeys of individuals, transforming communal practice into a deeply personal encounter with God. And so when we lift our voices, we're not merely reciting words, but we're sharing stories that have shaped our faith. And so when I sing, "Come thy fount of," you say, "Every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy praise. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise." Now, when we sing this, we are singing from our experiences of the one who we understand to be the fount of every blessing. We are singing from the streams of mercies we've been privy to in our own lives, and then are compelled to offer up our loudest praise. Singing this hymn out of the canon of our own experiences makes this more than just Robert Robinson's words on a page, but it becomes something new every single time, because my experience meets your experience, and then we sing together. And my experience tomorrow will be slightly shifted, and your experience tomorrow will be slightly shifted based on what we've experienced through the day, so we can come back and sing it, and it will mean something a little different. And so we can then sing, "Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, he to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood." It becomes personal, because now I have allowed the lyrics to intersect with my lived experience. And I have brought it and all of me into the community, trusting that the music making of it all holds space for what and who I bring in the process. And so living into that, I then can openly and freely pray, "Oh, to grace how Daily I'm constrained to be, yes. Let thy grace, Lord, like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to, and we continue, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above. My propensity to wander may be different than your propensity to wander, but we can both sing in the moment. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. And then we all can offer, here's my heart, Lord. With everything that's on it, with everything it has experienced, here's my heart, Lord. Take and seal it for thy courts above. The hymns and the songs become vessels carrying our joys, our sorrows, our victories, our struggles, creating a sacred space where our lived realities meet the transcendent. This convergence of personal narratives enriches the entire worship experience, making it then this dynamic and ever-evolving dialogue between the worshipers and God. Moreover, the canon of our experiences from which we sing fosters a sense of unity and empathy among the gathered community. As we sing together, we begin to understand and appreciate the diverse paths that have brought each person into the moment of worship. The shared act of singing, this shared breath that causes us to slow down and be intentionally aware, becomes a form of communal storytelling, where individual experiences are woven into a larger, more inclusive narrative. So when we sing from our experiences alongside the experiences of others, we create musical testimonies in the moment that call us all into community. And from my experiences in the church, this collective expression of faith, informed by the myriad of experiences of the participants gathered, strengthens the bonds within the community to which we are called at that moment. And it deepens the spiritual connection among its members. So in this way, the resonant voices and the shared breath in song becomes not only an offering to God, but also a powerful means of building and nurturing the spiritual and the emotional fabric of the community. The potential impact of this spiritual connection within the community is both profound and multifaceted. When individuals come together to sing from the canon of their experiences, they create an environment of mutual understanding and support. This shared spiritual practice fosters a deep sense of belonging and trust as members of the community recognize and honor each other's journey. This becomes an act of valuation, because when I can recognize and honor your journey, I am then making room for and valuing your lived experience. And the relationality of our activity creates an environment where I see, respect, and value your humanity. And this becomes a liberating act of justice. And so this collective expression of faith through song acts as a binding force, making visible those who've been invisible for far too long, and uniting people in common purpose to honor and to worship God, who invites all of us to bring our full selves into our practice. And so this unity is not just emotional, but it's also practical, as it inspires connectivity and has the potential to cultivate wholeness and healing within the community. And it can empower individuals to face challenges with a sense of solidarity and hope, knowing that they are supported by a community that shares and celebrates their faith. This, my friends, is kinship connection, creating a resilience and a compassionate network that reflects love, justice, empathy, and unity. Now, I am fully aware that what I am describing here is a communal experience that one can only hope for, particularly since the reality of our society, here in the US especially, is one where we are more divided than many of us have ever witnessed in our lifetime, right? And with the reality that we are more disconnected in human interaction than we've ever been. And so I recognize that the post-COVID digital landscape has also created even more distance in congregational worship and has required us to reimagine and redefine what community and public worship is. And that evolution of what has now become hybrid engagement in many spaces brings about its own questions of digital literacy and access. And so all of these realities and questions are definitely present with me as I outline this communal hope. And even are with me as I return to my thesis that worshiping through the creativity of our song can lead to wholeness and connection, uniting our voices and our spirits with one another and ultimately with God. So this might mean that we are reimagining the communal music making process to include the virtual platforms. It might mean that we return to an age-old understanding of worship that shifts the authoritative space from the fixed location of sanctuaries and imagines anew ritualized spaces that some people have already deemed sacred, and perhaps not all of us have actually accepted it. So this eschatological vision that I have of community connected through shared experience of singing from the canon of our own experience is not just about our singing, it's about the posture and the imagination with which we enter the music-making process. Now, I don't have the formula or the right answer. I'm sorry. I really have just come to prick our imaginations, to expand our understanding of how we can move beyond, or rather navigate, the realities within which we live and what they mean for us as we are venturing to sing the congregation song, as we are diving into singing our songs of faith. And in doing so, this shared breath that we've been exploring, this intentionality in singing the congregation song calls us to reckon with these realities. It calls us to face our social realities, good, bad, and indifferent, to face the realities of our lived experiences and the lived experiences of everyone in the community. This intentionality calls us to take time to sit with the highs, the lows, and the in-betweens of communal life. It requires us to engage the lived experiences of the community and makes us aware of the spiritual state of said community, which then helps us to imagine worship-filled moments and practices, perhaps helps us to imagine new songs to sing that help us, the people of God, worship God out of the realities of that spiritual state. This shared breath, friends, is really and truly a pastorally sensitive work that brings about honest and dynamic engagement poised for communal transformation. And so I'm going to conclude soon. Now, I'm a Baptist preacher, so you know that means I have a few more minutes to go. But as we conclude our time together, I want us to remember the profound power of shared breath and resonant voices, and this ability for deep connection in song to shape communal identity. Our voices lifted in unison, whether from within the space or from afar, rooted in the depth of and the respect for lived experiences, weave together this rich tapestry of collective journey. And the congregation's song becomes the soundtrack of our shared lives, a reminder that we are part of something greater than ourselves. And so I want to leave you with this final thought. I told you I'm Baptist. I have a couple of closings. But I do want to leave you with this final thought. What if we actually believed what we sing? What if our communal singing could truly bind us together through the boldness of our conviction? What if we believe that the grace we sing about has the power to save us and the power to save someone else? What if we believed that the world really would know we are Christians by our love? What if we actually believed pardon for sin and peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000 beside? What if we actually believed all are welcome? All are welcome. All are welcome in this place. Friends, what if we believe that God can replace my stony heart with a heart that's kind and tender? All my coldness and fear to your grace I now surrender. And that we are called to weep with those who weep, share the joy of each other. In the welcome of Christ, may we welcome one another. What if we believed the blood that Jesus shed for me way back on Calvary, the blood that gives me strength from day to day, it will never lose its power? What if we believe the expansiveness in that it reaches to the highest mountain and it flows to the lowest valley? What if we believed what we sing? Would we be different? Would the faith we sing be the faith we live? Would our singing shape our actions and our interactions? What if? What if? There's a song we like to sing with our youth in our church, and we've actually made it a part of our corporate benediction that simply says, "The Jesus in me loves the Jesus in you. The Jesus in me loves the Jesus in you." So easy, so easy, so easy to love. What if we really believed first that Jesus is in me and Jesus is in you, and that the Jesus in me loves the Jesus in you? How would my living be different? How would I not only sing, but be the congregation's song? Resonant voices, shared breath. This is intention and awareness as we breathe together, cultivating a community that is born out of the gifts of our lived experience. Thank you. Oh, I turned you off. Oh, there you go.
Amen. Thank you. We are grateful for Reverend Dr. Khalia Williams and her address this morning. We have at least 10 minutes left, so we are going to ask you and those online if you would turn to your neighbor for about 3 minutes and talk with each other about ideas and questions that have emerged from the address that you just heard. Next 3 minutes. The Lord be with you. The Lord be with you. The Lord be with you. My mic's not on. The Lord be with you.
There you go.
Got to use my Baptist voice because your mic wasn't working. We trust that your conversations have been rich. Are there any questions first from the Lovelace scholars? Do any of the Lovelace scholars have a question for Dr. Williams? Yes, we have a question right there. Right in the, yeah, straight ahead. In front of you, Mike.
We were wondering about the whole kind of idea of breath, and if you have any ideas or suggestions for how it can be integrated into a worship service so it doesn't feel kind of just tagged on at the beginning or the end, but so that people are really being impacted by it and that it is included in the service.
Great question. So for those who may not have heard some louder over there, the question essentially, taking this concept of breath, how do you integrate it into worship so it doesn't feel like it's just a little piece that's tagged on, but it actually becomes a part of the worship space or the worship experience? So that was a lot of the work that I have done here, and starting with breath actually is not a bad thing because it really does frame how we enter into worship and doing it enough times. But then as you are thinking about and really structuring your worship services, creating breath moments. So it doesn't always have to be an intentional, take a deep breath in, exhale. It could be the rhythm of worship breathes. And what happens when our rhythm of worship breathes and we have an exhale moment that could look like silence, right? One of the practices that I learned, a particular type of breathing, it's like a whole black hole to go down in the breath work and all the things that you can learn. But there are particular types of breathing that become very cyclical. And so how do we then think about a worship service flow that is cyclical? That's breath as well. And that does something for the community. There are parts, and we saw it yesterday evening, we saw it Sunday evening, this repetition in music, that's cyclical. Bringing it back again and again for it to really resonate and to kind of sink in and settle. And so thinking along that lines, but the very practice of breath, just getting people to slow down, or even having worship leaders slow down to breathe, right? So if it's, we stand to pray, let's breathe before we launch in. Or before we begin something, we all collectively breathe to enter in. The more that you do that and bring this intention and this awareness to the forefront in our congregations, the more it really starts to sink in. And what becomes really nice, and actually hits the point of what I think the purpose of worship is, folks carry it out with them. And it becomes practice in everyday life when it's done enough. So you just think of the creative ways, even a benediction. How do we breathe as we send ourselves out? Thinking that way. So don't be afraid to just introduce it. And you'll be surprised. Many of us will say, oh, we're breathing. Well, yeah, we breathe all the time, every day, right? I'm just helping us pay attention to the fact that we are breathing. And you don't have to make it, so, a lot of what I gave today is out of this research and this experimenting and this doing over and over again. And so I'm able to name the shared breath, the collective aspect of it. But first, just introduce the fact that we're gonna breathe together. Let's see what that looks like and what does the rhythm of worship need to be. Great question, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Do any of the fellows have a question? Oh, there are 2 questions. Jackie.
Here too.
First, thank you for a wonderful, inspiring presentation. I noticed that as you were doing your discovery and learning about this, you were doing that in 2019.
Yep.
And what you didn't say is that in 2020, we stopped breathing in community.
And I was still
Do you
doing
wanna
the work. So
comment
that
on
is the most impactful part of this work. So there's a couple things that were happening. I started doing this work in 2019, and I started in the fall of 2019, and it really was just kind of reading and researching. And then we entered into 2020, COVID happens, and now the idea of breathing together in community, my goodness. So I had to wrestle with that understanding of what does it look like for us to not be able to breathe together, for me to literally be in fear for my life if I'm breathing in community. This is also happening as Black and brown bodies are being annihilated through the country, right? And then we have, I can't breathe. All of this is happening together, and here I am doing research on breathing. That became very heavy research. Now, thank God, the breath coach that I found just so happened to also be an ordained minister who has a theological background. And so we were able to wrestle through a lot of this and thinking about, and this is where it became more than just about the act of breathing. And it became more of a theological deep dive of intention and awareness when we are in space with others. And it became then this very liberating thought process to think about how I can value and humanize in spaces when we come together with intention and awareness. That intention and awareness gets manifested through breathing together, this shared breath, but in a time where really digital connection somewhat dehumanized our experiences, and the very heightened reality of marginalized peoples in this country, right? And the historical dehumanization and the legacy of devaluation of this country all collide, then how do we begin to think about breath, intention, as a way in which we are called to do the work of justice, of seeing, respecting, valuing, and humanizing one another, and what connection comes out of that. But you're absolutely right. That is the one thing I did not name that was very, very much, so the entire year, all of 2020, is when I was doing the breath work, which had to be done via Zoom. So I couldn't be in the same space with the breath coach. We did, so it was literally 2-hour sessions over Zoom. Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
There's a question over there, and then Michael Hahn has a question, and then there's a question over there.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I think two observations. One about worship, keeping in mind that when we gather, we are the body of Christ. The body of Christ needs to breathe.
Yep.
And one of the ways we can do that as we plan music is particularly to use music as a way of reflecting on Scripture so that the song becomes our exhaling.
That's right.
For what we have taken in.
That's good. I might borrow that. Thank you.
Michael Hahn has a question, and then there's a question over there.
Thank you so much. I want to go a little bit different approach, thinking about Dr. Wise and Dr. Jones and you. And one of the things that struck me about our time together, which has been so valuable on many fronts, is the way you bring us beyond your CV into your personal lives and situate it. And I can only speak for myself, but I don't think I'm alone. People like me sort of make an assumption that the CV is where we really are, and that's not really where we are. And we don't take time. You don't rush into a thing. Now, I want to cover 5 points today. All of you have taken time to bring us into your story. Do you have advice for an old guy at 75? Can I start?
So I don't know that I have advice, but I will tell you why I do it. And Dr. Weiss, you may want to chime in on why you do it, right? It's a part of my cultural upbringing. Relationality is important. And so I've been formed a particular way, culturally, to really center meaningful connection. And then I switch into pastorally. I have learned people can't hear you if they don't feel like you know them. So before I can preach or teach, if I really want to make an impact, I need to just get to know you. Before I can offer instruction, I need to see you. Bring that into the academy. Time and time again, I've learned students receive and are transformed through the academic process when they feel like you care. The only way I can care is to know you. So in moments like this, it's important for me to spend 25 or 30% of my time inviting you into my personal space, because now I've disarmed the room and you feel like you know me, even if it's just a little bit. And so that allows for a different type of engagement versus I've got these 10 things that I want to say and I'm going to say them all, and you've never heard them because you haven't connected them to the person. And so anytime that I can not center myself, but connect personally, I will do that first. Because you'll remember something more when you leave here today, because you feel like you know a little bit about me. You know a little bit about my own personal landscape. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Hopefully there's a tip in there for you.
I'm Stephen Fearing, one of the Lovelace Scholars, and like many in this room, I'm also a preacher in addition to being a hymn writer. And I'm working on my sermon for this Sunday, and trust I'm not the only one. And the lectionary gospel passage comes immediately after the political violence of the execution of John the Baptist. And as I'm reading the text, knowing that that's all on our minds right now, I find it interesting that in chapter 6 of Mark's gospel, immediately after that political violence, Jesus' instruction to his followers is to rest. So as I'm listening to your talk, I'm curious if you have any thoughts on the role of breathing as it pertains to rest and how that pertains to nonviolent direct action, and how these days, as we're wrestling with the reality of political violence, how maybe breathing together can help us respond in a Christ-like manner.
I'm excited that you brought that text. I actually love John's version of that account because the Gospel of John. Okay, there we go. I'm excited that you brought that up. So I actually really enjoyed John's version of that account because the Gospel of John gives us that account and then shows us Jesus actually getting away. And so what I see there and what I've read into it is there's a need first in these moments, we are in one now, where we have to stop and breathe for ourselves to develop an emotionally healthy spirituality. So we then can come together collectively with a measure of emotional health within our spirituality, where we then can connect and become healthier together. And the whole point and premise of the shared breath is the slowing down, being intentional, and being aware. It's very easy in heightened times, particularly politically violent times, to be very reactive emotionally, right? And so the shared breath invites us to slow down and not to immediately react, but to witness where the Spirit of God is operating in the moment and to be informed of what our responses should be. And sometimes the just thing in the moment is to care for the community in the shared breath, to start there, right? And so it's really thinking about slowing down. Breath allows us to pause and become aware. It takes me back to the one comment that was given which was a faculty member here at Candler, by the way, who says, I can tell when we don't breathe because we're so quick to move and to react and to do. And so when you're able to slow down and become aware and connected, you become much more aware when you're not. And it helps bring a measure of balance. But at the heart of all of it, this is born out of the work of emotionally healthy spirituality. Yeah.
Colleagues, it is 10:30, so if anyone has any more questions for Dr. Williams, please feel free to meet with her afterwards, but join me in thanking her again for her address this morning.